Walt Ordelheide was born March 26, 1925, to Albert and Lula Ordelheide. He was the third of 4 sons. His first 18 years were spent in what is now called the Platt Park neighborhood at 1839 South Ogden Street, just a few blocks north of this church. He attended Asbury Elementary School and Denver's South High School. His parents' household, full of boys, was quite rambunctious, full of entrepreneurial ventures and mischief, according to the stories we've heard over the years. During his senior year of high school, unbeknownst to his parents, he enrolled in courses at University of Denver, which he paid for by his various jobs, such as paperboy and then as supervisor of paperboys. He had decided at a young age that he wanted to be a doctor. He related visiting the medical school campus of CU as a teenager and being in awe of the students he saw walking the old medical school quadrangle. He determined he would also one day be a medical student. However, World War II interrupted his educational plans. He was called to active service in August of 1943 at age 18. He told the recruiting officer he wanted to be in the Army, but was immediately assigned to the Navy. This turn of events alarmed him because he didn't even know how to swim. Nevertheless, 4 days later, he was on a train to North Idaho's Camp Farragut for basic training and swimming lessons. He subsequently served as a medic in Long Beach, San Diego, and eventually on the Pacific end of the Panama Canal. After an honorable discharge in 1946, he returned home and enrolled at University of Denver to complete his degree. That's when he met our mother, Maxine Hill, an operating room nurse at Porter Memorial Hospital. They married in 1949. He was accepted the following year to Loma Linda University School of Medicine, known then as Loma Linda College of Medical Evangelists. During school breaks, he happily worked in his brother's painting business to support his growing family and fund his medical education. He performed well academically and was eventually invited into Alpha Omega Alpha, the National Medical Honor Society. It was that education that, in the end, afforded him countless appreciative patients, lasting friendships, international adventure, and academic recognition, providing opportunity to mentor a new generation of physicians. Moving back to Colorado following medical school, he completed a year of postgraduate training at Greeley's Weld County Hospital. He then started a general practice in LaSalle, 5 miles away. His practice there continued until 1958, when a call to mission service arrived in his mailbox. Having been primed for mission service at Loma Linda University, it didn't take him long to decide. He and Mom, along with 4 young children, were soon on their way to Southeast Asia, where he provided medical services at mission hospitals in Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam. While in Vietnam, I was added to the family. In 1962, Dad returned to LaSalle, Colorado, where he again settled into private general practice, loving and being loved by his mostly rural patient population. He was a firm believer in Christian education, so worked hard during those years to send his 5 children to Christian schools all the way through college. Dad was a careful and insightful physician. Always curious, he felt it a priority to keep abreast of new developments in his field. As confirmation that he successfully passed the board of the recently minted American Academy of Family Physicians in 1972. That fact was perhaps what caught the attention of his academic colleagues, who in 1975 surprised him with an invitation to return to his alma mater to start a family medicine department. He courageously accepted that call and patiently struggled against numerous odds until in 1981 he was finally successful in establishing a family medicine residency training program at level in the University School of Medicine. He then chaired that department until his retirement in 1989. Near the time of his leaving Loma Linda, he successfully established an endowment for the Department of Family Medicine. A few years later, he was honored by the medical school with the establishment of the Walt Ordelheide Award, given annually to 1 or 2 worthy medical graduates. After retirement, Mom and Dad enjoyed traveling, often doing relief mission work in places like Jamaica, Pakistan, and Nepal. He also volunteered at the homeless shelter in Denver. He was an avid golfer and developed close friendships with several of his fellow golfers in both Loma Linda and Denver. He could do anything required for home improvement, liked to be busy, and was always ready to lend a hand and share his expertise with his children and family, often traveling to far corners of the country to help with their various projects. He also enjoyed gardening at local community gardens near his home in Denver. When Mom became disabled in her later years, he transitioned into housekeeper and caregiver. He loved it when his family came to visit, giving him opportunity to try new recipes for them while cooking for our mother. He tirelessly cared for Mom while keeping up with his household chores. Following Mom's death 7 years ago, he continued to live independently at Claremont Park Senior Living, where he made many new friends. He visited his children's homes often, making the trip to the Northwest nearly every year until 2023. He shopped weekly, cooked for himself, regularly attended church with the help of his fellow church members, kept up on the world of politics, and walked a mile most days until very recently. This August, while stowing his groceries purchased during his weekly trip to the grocery store, he fell, fracturing his hip. Surgical repair was successful, but was followed by only a brief rally. Then it gradually declined that ended in his peaceful passing on September 12th. He was 99 and a half. He was preceded in death by his nuclear family, by our mother, Maxine, and 1 grandson, Noel. He is survived by Carol and husband, Dan Meisinger of Idaho, Carl and wife, Barbara Ordelheide of Idaho, Karen Ordelheide and her husband, James Mason of Washington, Chris and his wife, Karen Ordelheide of Montana, myself and my wife, Gretchen, here of Denver, 11 grandchildren, 10 great-grandchildren, a large extended family, and numerous friends. He clearly had a full quiver, and remarkably, all but 3 of them are with us here today. 1 grandson, Andrew, and his wife, Liz, live in New Zealand, and they weren't able to make it. However, Andrew, while Dad was declining, Andrew made the trip over to visit him, and he arrived a half hour after he passed. And 1 grandson, Grant, couldn't make it today either. Each of his children and grandchildren were given the opportunity to share memories, and I'll begin with Sister Carol. Dad is my hero. He had good answers, He reassured me when things were scary. He never made me feel unimportant. Dad never sat around wasting time. He would not have survived in the procrastinators club. Dad was generous to others, but lived frugally. For example, our pantry shelves often had salvage depot tin cans of vegetables without labels. It was like opening the surprise each time. My understanding of my wise, loving, and protecting Heavenly Father is positively affected by my dad. Carl wrote, "It's a rare child in this world who is so fortunate to have a father like Walter. He didn't just love his kids, but made us feel like he believed in us. He was firm, but wise in his discipline, most often without evident anger. He often persuaded me to change my mind and bad behavior just by telling a story. When I needed a bit more nudging, he would ground me by quietly hiding my bike, avoiding an embarrassing scene with the family. While Dad loved nearly everything about his profession and was totally dedicated to it, family always came first. He would warmly greet his kids whenever we interrupted his work in the office or hospital to ask a question. On many a summer evening, he would stop outside the house on his way home from the office to play catch or initiate a family football game on the front lawn. At least a couple of times each year, he would close his practice for days at a time to take his family on vacation adventures such as camping, skiing, or canoeing. Nurturing family ties was second nature to him. When I was away at school, his weekly letters came like clockwork. His enthusiasm and cheery laugh greeted me every time I called him, even up until his hospitalization this summer. I so miss those chats. Karen wrote, "Dad provided so many opportunities for me as well as abundant encouragement along the way. When hiking in the Colorado mountains, I would be ready to quit, and he would tell me to just put one foot in front of the other. And eventually I would make it to the top. It was a great metaphor for life, and I have repeated that mantra to myself on many subsequent occasions. He didn't take me to task for bad decisions I made along the way, just supported me until things got straightened out. I had not and probably would not have considered medical school if Dad hadn't suggested it in my senior year of college, at which time I still had no idea what to do with my life. He then supported me through that endeavor. He was fun to travel with. We teamed up against dishonest street money exchangers on occasion and bested them. He was amazingly clever, could fix anything, and helped us with so many home projects and repairs. He painted a significant portion of the interior of our house at age 85. Up until the last 5 weeks, our weekly phone calls were always interesting and full of his observations about small and great things going on around him. He is greatly missed." Chris wrote, "Even with the demands in his professional life, Dad always made time for his family. Whether it was a neighborhood football game in the front yard, backpacking, canoeing, digging dinosaur bones, hunting arrowheads, ice skating, skiing, golfing, or traveling the world. Dad was always happy to create fun and adventure. Equally important, if not more, Dad was intent on making sure no one had idle hands. He always had a job or a project for his kids, whether it was sweeping the garage, mowing the lawn, painting the house, or the continuous remodeling projects at home and the office. After Dad and his brothers bought a small farm, irrigating and baling hay was added to the list of jobs. At times, Dad farmed his kids out to Aunt Doris and Uncle Richard to pick pickles and pull weeds. All of these activities were, I believe, intended by Dad to ensure his kids grew up to be responsible and productive adults. I expect there were times he worried about the outcome, at least with some, as his kids grew up. Through all of this, including those occasional frustrating events initiated or caused by one or more of his kids, Dad supported, loved, and was proud of the family. Even in his later years, he always wanted to know about and was happy to tell others about the activities of his kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. Dad will be missed. To me, Dad was a man of few words, often frustratingly few, but the way he lived his life spoke volumes. For me, the most powerful example of this was the way he spent time each morning in focused time with God. He never told me he did this, nor did he ever share anything with me from those morning encounters. But for some time during my childhood, my room was right across from his study, and I knew what he was doing. Because of his example, I felt like it was something that I should also aspire to. Should is not a foundation for any practice, but over the years, should turned to could to I can't imagine my life without my morning moments in the presence of God. It is without question the most valuable legacy Dad left me. These encounters have left me with an unwavering confidence in God. I know without a doubt that I will be reunited with Dad in eternity. And in that environment of freedom, he will be able to share some of those words that I so often long to hear. Granddaughter Allison wrote, Walt was many things, a wise professional, a devout Christian, a man who believed in hard work, integrity, and frugality. To me, he was also a loving grandfather. He didn't necessarily use a lot of words to directly express affection, but I understood it through the many kind and caring things that he did. A few especially more memorable ones come to mind. Grandpa and Grandma's home in South Denver was often a refuge for me as a young adult, just out of college, and then as a freshly graduated veterinarian with no job prospects. I was so grateful for the spare bedroom, their endlessly welcoming smiles, and for the conversations we had over breakfast in their sunny kitchen. I was also thankful for Grandpa's repeated willingness to help me move my belongings from one Front Range city to the next during my transitions into and out of graduate school. We would pack everything into the bed of his Ford Ranger truck and then fly down I-25 or throughout the greater Denver metropolitan area. Regardless of the road, Grandpa never wasted any time getting from point A to point B. From the stories he often shared, I sensed that Grandpa was a pragmatic and compassionate physician. And once I experienced that personally. During a brief and highly unsuccessful stint as a knife salesperson, I sliced one of my fingers with a very sharp knife shortly before the sales pitch for said knife. I was at Grandpa and Grandma's house at the time. Grandpa, well into his retirement by then, gamely pulled out his worn black medical bag and produced a suture pack of unknown age. He boiled it in a kettle of water on the stovetop while I held an ice cube over the persistently hemorrhaging gash. Once the suture pack was deemed sufficiently sterilized, Grandpa efficiently and gently stitched up the laceration. Then we set the table for dinner. He didn't say much, as typical, in response to my thanks. He did offer his usual, "It's no problem," with his trademark grin and a glint of humor in his eyes. Grandpa always made me feel loved and cared for, and I will be forever grateful for the many acts of kindness he gifted me. Grandson Carl wrote, Grandpa Walt was a great person. When we were visiting him, we would wake up at dawn to go golfing because Grandpa always said it was always wise to be first off the tee. After golf, we would go home and rest, while Grandpa was out tinkering with something in the garage. Usually, our rest consisted of watching Matlock with Grandma. And then we would visit the grandparents in Denver, and they would make sure that we had time for a quick stop at the spaghetti factory after a Rockies baseball game Sunday afternoon. That was fun. Grandpa was someone who was kind, fun, and you could always count on. Me, my wife, and kids would talk to Grandpa every so often, and when our conversation was done, we would say, "We love you, Grandpa," and he would just say, "Okay, see you later." That word love was a tough one for him. He did tell me he loved me about one time in my life, thanks to my wife. But Grandpa, we do love and miss you. We know that we will see you in heaven soon. Grandson Grant wrote, Grandpa was a passionate golfer and was always happy to get out on the course with his kids and grandkids. As much as he enjoyed a round of golf, there was an equal disdain for slow golf. This meant any time I wanted to play with him, it required a 4 a.m. wake-up call, so we could be the first one on the course. We would pull into the empty parking lot well before the sunrise, quickly scanning to see if there were any other cars there before us. Once on the course, it was always important that we move as quickly as possible to the first tee to make sure that no one got off in front of us. Usually we ended up waiting around for the darkness to lift, while Grandpa negotiated with the starter to let us tee off, since it was light enough. While most golfers' moods are tied to their scores, Grandpa seemed to be directly related to how quickly we finished the round. To this day, I still prefer to play golf at Walt's pace. Grandson Arthur wrote, Grandpa was a man devoted to adding goodness to his world. It was his way of worshiping and honoring God. I see this in the kindness of his interactions, the confidence in which he stepped forward into service, and his daily rituals. Grandpa taught us the subtle Ordelheide approach, listening and perceiving more than talking as a way to care for others. A few things that will remind me of him: discussing the weather, pickled onions and cucumbers, Oswald Chambers, my utmost for his highest, and the Denver Broncos. Granddaughter Katie wrote, just after RJ and I got married, I had a work conference in Denver. We planned for RJ to come out and join me at the end of the trip and go stay with Grandma and Grandpa for the weekend. When my conference finished up, Grandpa showed up in his trusty Ranger pickup to pick me up from my hotel. He told me right away his water heater had broken, but he already had a new one to replace it. When we got home, I wasn't sure how he planned to get that huge new water heater out of the back of the truck and down to the basement. But he looked at me and said, you and I should be able to get this downstairs. So the two of us somehow dragged and pushed that thing up the garage steps, down the basement steps, and into the laundry room. Then Grandpa went to work to get it installed. A few minutes later, he came out with his slight grin and said, well, it seems the old water heater is now working, but it's good, we'll have a backup. I assume he probably ended up keeping that backup water heater down in the laundry room until he and Grandma moved to their retirement home years later. One summer when we were little, I think Allie and I spent a few days together in Melinda at Grandma and Grandpa's house. I don't even remember what we did most of the time, but I remember sitting at breakfast with Grandpa while he showed us how to make sure we got all the grapefruit juice out of each half of our grapefruit. I think the grapefruit must have come from a tree in his yard. One of my favorite memories in the last few years is watching Grandpa, or Papa too, as my kids call him, get all the way down and lay on the floor to play with trains with Oliver. He was probably 97 at the time. I also remember Grandpa always reading my utmost for his highest, for morning worship and breakfast whenever we visited. In all of my memories of him, Grandpa's life mirrored the words he read to us every morning from that devotional book. He loved us all and had such a humble heart of service for Christ. RJ, Katie's husband, wrote, I have a couple memories that stand out when I think of Walt. The first memory highlights his parallel parking. All of the family was meeting at the spaghetti factory, and some of the cousins were riding with Walt in his dreamy Buick, which, by the way, I drive now. Luckily for us, there was an open parking spot along the sidewalk right near the front of the restaurant. The space was tight but doable. Walt shimmied his way in there and backed his car right into the car behind us. Realizing he backed up too far, he punched it forward to kiss the bumper of the car in front of us as well. We all breathed a little easier when the car was finally put in park and the engine turned off. The second was the first time we made it out to Denver. He generously offered to take me golfing, just him and I, at 5 in the morning. It was so dark when we started that we couldn't tell where our tee shots landed. When two young men eventually cruised past us on a golf cart, Walt's comment made it plain that no self-respecting person uses a car when it can walk a course. I played terrible, but I had a blast. Walt worked hard, loved greatly, and his generous character was always on display. He will be truly missed. Grandson Albert wrote, it all began when Gramps showed us how to braid the compost pile for earthworms. At 10 years old, the stench was overwhelming and didn't seem like a good idea or that anything would be worth doing this for. Amazingly, one scoop of the shovel revealed gobs of worms, so it didn't take long to fill our container. With worms in hand, we headed down to the lake, where Gramps showed us how to attach the worm to the hook. I thought we should start with a smaller one, but Gramps went for the biggest and juiciest one he could find. To this day, a small twinge of guilt dances through my mind each time a worm is slid onto a hook. But because Grandpa did it, I managed to get by. We dropped the hook into the water and tied the line to the dock, and then, by Gramps' direction, we cleared out. No sense in waiting around when there's work to be done. Not sure if I have that part of fishing fully perfected. Grandpa always seemed busy doing some sort of home maintenance task when he visited. Waiting for a fish to bite was apparently no exception. Some 20 minutes later, I returned to check on our life, and sure enough, there was a beautiful 20-inch, or possibly 5-inch, smallmouth bass swimming around the end of our line. Instantly, euphoria hit a new high. I ran as fast as I could to get Grandpa and tell him the good news, not to mention someone needed to hold the fish in to take the hook out. All the memories of the smelly compost and the impaled wriggling worm were miraculously gone. Thanks to Grandpa, this life-changing event led to countless hours of therapeutic brotherly bonding on the docks, hours of prayerful pleas to heaven, plenty of trips to the hardware store, and several more haul-ins. Causes for great elation and joyfulness. Early signs indicate that these skills will pass on future generations will benefit as well. Gramps introduced me to the world of golf and the wonderfully frustrating challenges that go along with it when he gifted me a set of irons that he had built in his workshop. Through lessons of perseverance, etiquette, and temperance, golfing with Grandpa was always a treat and something to be looked forward to each time the family got together. Some of my later memories of golfing with Grandpa happened in the wee hours of the morning. On several trips to Denver, we'd wake up well before dawn, Grandpa already showered and shaved, would have a delectable breakfast spread with toast, a pot of multigrain cereal, fruit platters, a variety of exotic nuts, numerous tea options, juice, and postum. Necessary nutrition needed to give us the best chance at pars and birdies that day. Later in the morning, around 4:30 or so, we'd hop in the 97 Ranger and drive briskly, with all green lights timed perfectly, to Welshire Golf Course. Being first on the tee seemed to be an important part of the plan, and I sensed Grandpa was worried someone might get out in front of us and slow us down. Heaven forbid it be a foursome of ladies. The cool air, bird songs, morning dew, and smell of freshly cut grass all lent themselves to the magical ambience that took place on those special occasions with Grandpa. By the time we finished the front nine, the sun was starting to show, and by the time we finished the back nine, the pro shop was almost open. Rarely, if ever, did I witness Grandpa getting upset over an errant shot, and he always had words of encouragement for those of us that weren't nearly as consistent as he. Grandson Alex wrote, "It's impossible to think about my childhood without quickly remembering so many of the fun times I had hanging out with my grandpa. And given how great a person he was, it's also impossible not to think about him as a great example to try to model character after. It was so nice to grow up close to him, and it was amazing to be able to better appreciate how good of a person he was as I got older. There are a few people that I have managed to that have managed to balance having a good time and integrity as well as he did. He will be greatly missed." The youngest grandson, Maxwell, arrived when Papa was nearly 89, so he didn't experience the active grandpa that his older cousins did. In fact, something that often tickled Maxwell was during our visits to him to look up and find Papa had fallen asleep, sometime mid-conversation. But Maxwell and Papa shared a love for their favorite restaurant. Maxwell turned 10 just a few days after Dad died, and we went to the restaurant to celebrate his birthday. And he noted that it just didn't seem the same without Papa. We're now going to be blessed by a musical number from our third one of Dad's grandsons. But before that, I just want to also take a moment to introduce our officiating minister today. As you've heard, like many in his generation, direct expressions of affection and or gratitude was not one of Dad's strong points. But you could tell the importance of someone in his life by how often he spoke about it. Our Pastor Phil Muller, who's going to officiate, was someone that I've heard about for years. And I met him for the first time in Dad's last hospital visit. But when I met he and his wife, I felt like I was meeting an old family friend, because that's just how important he was. He has served as a minister in the Lutheran Church and an educator, and is now retired. And he and his wife were very dear friends of both Mom and Dad. And on behalf of myself and my siblings, we just want to let you know how honored we are that you would spend this time with us. Arthur.
We struggled in the Lutheran Church, wanting to stay formal, but wanting to let the musicians know how much we appreciate it. And so I know if you can clap. My wife and I moved into Stony Brook in the year 2009. And my wife was not happy with our house. We needed some window boxes for some flowers. We checked with the beautification committee chair, Dot Mulaney was her name. And she said, well, I'm not very happy. She said, give Walter a call. Walter's our handyman here. So she called Walter. He came over in his pickup. I don't know where the pickup is now, but got his measurements, got the boxes, everything set. And that was about it. A week later, he came over to install them with the hinges, and we had a chance to visit a little bit. And that visiting and connecting lasted for 15 years worth. And my wife got 2 nice flower boxes, but that was kind of a footnote for a chance to enjoy Walter Ordelheide. And my words today would be more for the great-grandchildren. I wouldn't want them to not know who Walter was and what he stood for and how he could change somebody's life. I'm only 11 years his younger, and I thought I had my act together pretty well, but following along with Walter and a number of activities, I became more attuned to stepping up my game. A few things to remember Walter by. Number 1, exercise is paramount. He was a tail-powered walking machine. If he looked outside and it looked like it was starting to rain, what would Walter do? He would get out an umbrella or a raincoat. If it looked like there was this much Colorado snow out there, he'd get the boots on and whatever gear he needed because he wouldn't let a day slip by. Exercise, number 1. Number 2, he loved eating good food. When when your cherries are ripening in the Pacific Northwest and they show up in Denver, I'd always give it back to Maxine. Loved those best of all. When Rocky Ford melons would come in, the kids even called them candy bowl because they were so sweet and juicy. We'd get a couple over for Walter and Maxine. Couple out of peaches. My wife would make some cupcakes or some muffins, and we'd stop over and drop them off for them. But the best food of all is when you grow it in your own garden. And my wife and I happened to locate a spot only a mile away from Stony Brook where Samuel's Elementary School, they had a large playground. They still had about a half acre that was not being used for anything. So somebody back a few years before we got there, it started, we got there, they had 40 plots. We were about 11 by 15. That's plots ready for people. They had some set aside for classrooms, but so we hopped in there and then brought some produce over to Walter and then invited him to come over sometime to see where we were operating. And sure enough, the next year he had a plot right beside us. A row of kale, of course, carrots, beets. He had 3 tomato plants. 2 were so would have one ended up being the blue ribbon tomato plant for the whole project. Some cucumbers he had, some snap peas. They had a program started at the school, after school garden club. So Walter and I gave them a little financial support to keep the thing going. And then the kids at recess time, instead of just going out to the playground, they had access to the gardens. And a number of the growers there were happy to have the kids come in and snack a bit when the snap peas were ready, or when the cherry tomatoes, the reds or the oranges or the yellows, would just come in and snack a little bit, maybe a little cucumber, pull up a carrot. Nothing is better. Walter would attest to this. Nothing is better than growing your own food and eating some of it in green beans, even eating some of it while you're there in the garden. Third thing I learned from Walter, he had a way of being cheerful and grateful and positive no matter the situation. To give you an example, I came past Wilshire Golf Course on my way over here, made me think again with Walter. To walk that 18 holes, you would cover about 3.5 miles minimum. That's if you're staying in the fairway. So at the end of your 18 holes, if you had a good score, great. If you didn't, if you'd used the whole course, the rough over here, the rough over there, your score might not have amounted to anything, but when they ask you how you're on, which you could say, I might have set a personal record in walking at least 4.5 miles this round. Walter was very, very good at sharing if he had something special. He called and said he and Maxine were coming over here to this church. They were showing a movie called Forks Over Knives. If you've seen that. He said it's supposed to be good, help them learn how to live a healthy life. So they picked us up, brought us over, and there was some good information for us. And then we had some healthy snacks afterwards. But we was only too happy when he had something good, he was eager to share it. And when someone needed help, he would be available. If there's a way he could be a resource. Even after his retirement, when Adventist Mission, World Missions said, there's a country here, they need a doctor. What are we going to do when Walter's hand goes up? And he and Maxine were on another tour of duty, and they're back, and I said, we've got another country that's over here. Walter kept raising his hand, kept volunteering, making himself available. Every time over the course of 15 years that we visited Walter and Maxine, they would tell us about family. They would tell us about you. I'm sure that we heard about every one of you during that course of time. He wanted to know what you were doing and would tell it. This person is doing this, one's out of the country, this one is into photography, I don't know, with this National Geographic, and this one is. But he loved you and talked about you all the time. And the last thing, which probably is the first thing, is that Walter was a man who loved God. He would start the day and end the day. When I was a minister, I visited some parishioners, and it was kind of sad to see that there was dust on the Bible. Never a chance for Walter. Thereby his favorite seat was the Bible and Chambers and maybe another spiritual author or two. And he started the day and ended the day, and during the day, he was in touch with God. He loved God. And you and I know that God loved him right back. How do you say goodbye? Maybe we got enough memories, and Peter shared on behalf of you some really, really great ones. How do you let go of someone like that? You have to find a way. Scripture tells us that love never ends. Maybe the three best words in the book. Love never ends. And that love between Walter and each member of his family and his friends, that love sees nothing to separate us from now and the time that we have a chance to see Walter again on the other side. It's been an honor for me to get to know Walter, to play some golf with him, to do some gardening with him, just to share some good times about family and friends. I missed my last chance. I had a couple peaches and a couple muffins ready to take to him. I called in to see if he'd been shifted back from 179 back to 149 there at Claremont Park, and they said, I'm sad to tell you that Walter's home is not here anymore. But we know where he is. To the family, I'm happy to be a friend. If I couldn't be an Ordelheide, I'm happy to be a friend of the Ordelheides.
$4.95. If I could have the words of Walt Ordelheide in prayer. One of his joy to listen to him pray, whether it was in public settings or privately in a family gathering. The man knew God. I invite you to close with prayer as we do that now. Lord, we are very thankful that as we gather, it's a celebration of life, not a dirge, a time where we don't have hope, but we have all the hope in the world because of Jesus Christ. Because he gave us men like Walter, Dr. Ordelheide, Dad. We're thankful, Lord, for a man who showed us how to walk with you. With that in mind, we ask that you go with us from here, and may we find ourselves continue to ask, Lord, what do I need to be looking at in my own life that will mean we walk with Walter into eternity because of Jesus Christ? With that in mind, bless us as we move from here. In Jesus' name, amen. That concludes our service. You're welcome to visit a bit, but we're glad that you came to celebrate with us the life of Walter Ordelheide. Blessings on you.
was at the Florida Church in Dr. Moore, and his dad was working for Elton's Belts. Or the Belts. And was driving his truck over the rain of grieve. Flew out of his head. And several muscles in his nerve and well, that was done at Pearl. Well, I used to work in a building just last year. I had an office building that was on my property. One of the and we did a little conversation at the time. So him to later, some of the other stuff. But I saw his mom pull up. Talking to the Browns family. Wisconsin.